Maharaj. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanachalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kada Mayam Dadati Supadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parjana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Rita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Saptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanuste Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Vishnuparishthaya Bhutale Srimate Radhanath Swami Namine Namo Vishnupadaya Krishnaparishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pachani Vishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshtarne Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langheti Grim Yatkapadam Maham Mande Shri Gurum Din Taranam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. I'd like to welcome all of you. So, we are continuing our discussion in the Srimad Bhagavatam of the pastimes of Narad Muni's conversations with King Prachina Barhi. Just so a very quick refresher. Narad Muni approaches King Prachina Barhi after the sons of Prachina Barhi received the mercy of Lord Shiva in the form of the instructions of Rudra Gita. They were busily engaged in austerities and worshipping the Supreme Lord. But back home, King Prachina Barhi, rather than cultivating Krishna consciousness, was busy in materialistic sacrifices. And we discussed how most people who we see as religious are actually using religion as a means of sense enjoyment. Which means that even though they are engaged in religion, and it is good that they are engaged in religion, it is better than being irreligious, but they use religion as a means for materialistic sense enjoyment, better materialistic sense enjoyment. So he was too attached and engaged in material fruitive activities, karma kanda, performing sacrifice after sacrifice, especially animal sacrifices. Narad Muni comes to him and shakes him up. When a very advanced soul speaks, because he speaks with so much realization, so much depth of understanding, the words of great souls have a tremendous power to actually penetrate. So Narad Muni asked him point blank, why are you engaged in this kind of activities? Don't you understand that these kind of fruitive activities, even though they may be religious, do not actually lead to what you want it to, what you want to achieve from it. Everybody engages in religious activities thinking that it will avoid misery and give happiness. The path of fruitive activities doesn't lead in that direction. This is a misunderstanding. Of course, performing religious activities is better than performing irreligious activities. But that doesn't counter the suffering condition of material existence. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jatire shayanam. And continues in samsara. There is no amount of punya having performed which one transcends material existence. Looking like that, because punya is just another category of material activity. Better than papa, it is still material. It is not going to be liberating. So Narad Muni, through his mystic power, helps King Prachina Bhari to see the animals that he has sacrificed, especially improperly sacrificed, how they are waiting to tear apart his body with their horns. Prachin Bhari is shaken. Prachin Bhari becomes humble. He takes shelter of Narad Muni and says, I've been absorbed in materialistic activities. You please instruct me. Understanding his situation, and now that he has taken a humble position, Narad Muni decides to instruct him. But he realizes that, I cannot tell him very directly. I have to be a bit more subtle in how I instruct him. And because materialistic people generally like to hear about stories of great kings and powerful people, so I will try to instruct him by telling him the story of a king, of King Puranjana. But actually the story of King Puranjana is an allegory. Allegory means the external story is telling something, but behind the story there is a different meaning. The story represents something. And actually the story of King Puranjana is actually the story of King Prachina Bhari himself. So we had started discussing that story of King Puranjana in chapter 25. Where we discuss how King Puranjana comes, crosses Himalayas, comes south, comes into Bharatvarsha, is looking for a suitable place to stay. The word Puranjana means the enjoyer of the body. So Puranjana represents the soul, who is looking for a suitable body for material enjoyment. And finally he comes to this city of 9 gates, Navadwarapuri. And there he comes in and he roams around. He sees so wonderful. Finally finds one very beautiful lady there, Puranjani. And he becomes attracted by her. And then he has this conversation with her. And we discuss that in detail, how he tries to appease her and ask her very sweet questions. And then she responds back. And she's also attracted to him. And finally, they both agree to come together and enjoy staying in that body. And they continue to enjoy, having various kinds of materialistic enjoyments. King Puranjana performs various kinds of yajnas and others to make sure that he can continue his enjoyment. So while Narad Muni doesn't yet debrief, he doesn't tell him what exactly is the moral of the story, he's just telling him a story. And actually King Prachina Bhari is not able to get the moral. He's just hearing the very interesting story. So of course I am explaining now what is the meaning behind the story also in parallel right now. But as Puranjana is, Maharaj Prachina Bhari is listening to the story, he yet hasn't figured out that actually This is the story of his life. He figures that out much later. So we are going to chapter 26. Actually, I was thinking whether I'll, of covering 26, 27, 28 together. But then when I went through 26, I realized that, perhaps I will target to cover 26 only today, because there are so many points there in the purports also that Prabhupada explains. And I thought that it's not a bad idea to understand some of these points in detail. So we will complete chapter 26 today. So the story goes like this, that King Puranjan was very attached to Puranjan. He was always with her, and he was always enjoying in the city of 9 gates. But one day, King Puranjan, he took up his bow and arrows, his armor, his quiver of arrows, and accompanied by his 11 commanders, it is said, and with unlimited arrows, sat on his chariot, which was driven by 5 swift horses, and he went to a forest, which is known as the Panchaparastha. Now, the Acharyas explain that this King Puranjan sitting on a chariot and going to the forest, the chariot here is the body, and Puranjan is the soul, and he is going out from his home. And apparently Puranjan, in this particular episode, left Puranjani back at home in the palace. He didn't take her with him. And by himself, leaving her, he goes into the forest. Why does he go into the forest? He goes into the forest for hunting. Now, very wonderfully, the Bhagavatam explains, and Prabhupada also explains the purports. Actually, normally it was very difficult for Puranjan to give up Puranjani, but on that day he was so inspired to hunt that he went without caring for his wife. Now, Puranjani represents, as we discussed, the intelligence. Generally, Puranjani is representing the dharmic intelligence. It's an intelligence which even though the material intelligence is dedicated towards enjoyment of matter, it is still doing it in a dharmic way. But here Puranjan abandoned his dharmic intelligence and with the adharmic, demoniac mentality, went into the forest for hunting. So Acharyas explain what this means is that the living entity sometimes gives up his dharmic intelligence and indiscriminately goes out into the world to hunt. Hunt for what? Hunt for sense enjoyment. Prabhupada says, like a man giving up his wife and hunting for other women. So he was really affected by a demoniac propensity. And being affected by the demoniac propensity of strong Rajagun and Tamogun, his heart of Puranjan became so hard, the Bhagavatam says, he became very merciless. He went into the forest and was indiscriminately killing animals. Went on killing, went on killing, went on killing. The Bhagavatam says that he was not even feeling remorseful for killing these animals. The Bhagavatam says that yes, in scriptures there is some permissibility for killing animals by a king. And the Bhagavatam says that if a king is too much attached to eating meat, sometimes some kings, because of being very passionate, they're too attached to eating meat, then the scriptures say that, why doing a sacrificial performance by offering the animal, and that to certain animals, not any animals, not cow. There are only some 7 or 8 animals scriptures have mentioned. I do not remember that verse, which can be offered in sacrifice. in a particular way, propitiating Goddess Durga, and then that flesh can be eaten after the sacrifice. And within that sacrifice, one has to whisper a mantra into the ear of the animal sacrifice, which is Mam Saha. Mamsa means I am killing you in this life, in the next life you kill me and eat. So there is a regulation of the process of meat eating. And also sometimes Kshatriyas are given a little bit of license because they are supposed to fight in war, sometimes in peacetime, just to be able to practice and keep up with their skills. Sometimes they are allowed to go out into the forest and hunt wild animals. Just enough to keep them fit for battle. So a little bit of provision is there. Of course, it doesn't mean to say that there will not be any reaction to doing this, but it is not considered very degrading for them, especially because they are in a strongly Rajogun mode, and they will remain in that Rajogun mode. But if one becomes whimsical in one's killing of animals, either for eating or in hunting, whatever it is, then actually one goes down into the lower modes. Narad Muni warns King Prachina Parishad that this is a very dangerous situation for a king. That if he loses his intelligence and whimsically starts creating himsa to other animals just to satisfy the tongue. Throughout the Bhagavatam, throughout the Gita, Prabhupada oftentimes makes this comment that this kind of a mechanized slaughterhouse where in Kali Yuga we see for meat eating, that is extremely sinful and there will be severe reactions for it. In fact, Prabhupada says huge large-scale wars, large-scale famines are all results of this kind of indiscriminate animal killing. I was reading somewhere, I think per day, if I'm not wrong, it's like the number of chicken which are killed. I don't remember right now on top of my head, but it was huge number. Millions or maybe even a billion, I do not remember exactly on top of worldwide. It's just a crazy number. So this kind of excessive violence performed on a regular basis has a severe reaction to the whole planet. And that's why we see that, why Kali Yuga there is so much suffering, because material nature reacts. When we break the four regulative principles, civilized human life means at least one should follow the four regulative principles. No meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex. In Kali Yuga, we see that all these rules are being broken. Amit is saying that what is the period of time? Let me see the full message. 1 day, 197 million chickens being slaughtered on just 1 day. 197 million chickens slaughtered on 1 day. 72 billion chickens were slaughtered in 2019. Can you imagine? What kind of crazy violence? Crazy, mindless violence. So all these things have their reaction. That is why there's so much war, so much suffering, so many ways. So as he's telling the story, Narad Muni is again warning Prachin Bari that you have to understand that this is a very, because Prachin Bari himself was involved in animal killing, not directly so much in hunting, but in the form of doing animal sacrifices. He was excessively doing that. So a lot of suffering Puranjan also created, according to the story, lot of suffering to so many animals. So Bhagavatam says, one who acts whimsically, unrestrictedly, influenced by pride, becomes bound by all this karma. And he falls down into the lower modes. He loses his intelligence and gets bound up in samsara. So even the people around, when they were seeing how mercilessly Puranjan was behaving, they actually felt very sad that how he was being so merciless and heartless. They said Puranjan killed many animals like rabbits, boars, buffaloes, wild cows, antelopes, porcupines. And many of these animals were suitable for sacrifice. And after killing them, after killing many animals whimsically, unnecessarily, he became very tired. Now, what this means is the analogy story. What this means is sometimes a living entity gives up his good intelligence and performs sinful activities by hunting in the forest whimsically, thinking he will be happy. But ultimately, he just becomes tired and frustrated. Because the nature of sinful activity is one thinks that why should I perform dharma to enjoy? So much hard work. Let me just grab and enjoy. One thinks that that will become an easier part to enjoyment, but the universal system is so created that one cannot grab material happiness like this. Without yajna, if one tries to grab happiness, one becomes a thief. And if one is a thief, then he is punished. One cannot enjoy. So being very tired, being very frustrated, very hungry and thirsty, King Puranjan finally returned home. He gave up the forest, he returned home. He took bath, ate suitable food, and feeling refreshed, he took rest. So what is the meaning of this? I'm trying to tell you the meaning of the story correspondingly. The meaning of this is remembering his sinful activities. He was becoming so frustrated that finally he said, okay, let me stop all these sinful activities. I'm not getting happiness. There's so much of inconvenience and misery. Correct? Like sometimes, some thieves, dacoits, criminals, they try so hard to enjoy. Eventually they realize, oh, the path I've chosen is actually the path of misery, and it leads to only suffering. And then they decide that they want to give up. So just like he gave up the forest and came back home, the living entity, when he realizes this, he decides to give up his sinful activities and again establish himself in dharma. And he takes bath. What kind of bath? Performs the necessary atonement by taking guidance from the Brahmanas. And he eats suitable food, which means he gives up unsuitable food. Eating, intoxication, he gives up. And he becomes refreshed again. Refreshed means again he becomes stable. He was so agitated in his mind, he becomes stable in his mind. Because unless one starts becoming steady, one cannot properly reflect on the real goal of life. When a person is too much influenced by either mode of passion or mode of ignorance, cannot reflect on the higher goals of life. Sometimes people again and again ask, oh, why we need to follow the four regular principles? Why can't we just chant Hare Krishna? Unless one is in the mode of goodness, one cannot properly, unless one gives up sinful life and becomes situated in mode of goodness, make any tangible spiritual progress is not possible. Krishna has mentioned that in the Bhagavad Gita also. Yesham tu antagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante te dvandva moha nirmukta bhajante mam ananya bhat. if I'm not wrong. That's how the verse goes. Which means, Yesham tu antagatam papam. For those whose sinful activities are eradicated and who have performed significant pious activities, such people being steady and not being deluded by the dualities, they are able to take shelter of the process of devotional service nicely and attain devotional service too. If a person is continuously being agitated by Rajogun and Tamogun by performing activities of meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex, then progress in spiritual life is very difficult. One cannot go very far. It is like an elephant bath. Elephant bath means an elephant. He goes and takes bath, and as soon as he comes out, he rolls in the mud on the bank of the lake. Again, he covers his whole body with mud. So what was the value of the bath if he has to immediately come out and cover himself with mud? So that's the example from the scriptures. Say that this is an elephant bath. So no point if we are going to continue. Of course, if we are doing sadhana and gradually trying to control and regulate our sinful activities with the aim to eventually give them up, that is good. This doesn't mean that one should not chant or do any spiritual activities if one is following this. It means that one must work towards regulating, reducing, and eventually eliminating these activities. One may not be there yet, but one must work towards it. If one is working towards it, one will be at least progressive. But if one wants to bathe and roll in the mud and continue to doing that for all time to come, one is not going to very far. So Puranjana gave up his sinful activities. The form, he came back home, he gave up the hunting, came back, he realized, took his bath, he did that atonement. It is said then he decorated himself with nice ornaments, put sandalwood pulp, garlands. All the sandalwood pulp and garlands means he again took up to dharmic behavior. Having realized that violation of dharma is only causing misery, not happiness. Then suddenly he remembered, oh, where is my wife, the beautiful Puranjani? He had totally forgotten, right? He had given up his wife and gone to the forest to enjoy. So he started remembering Puranjani. Which means he started remembering his old intelligence which was fixed in dharma. Oh yeah. At one time my intelligence was fixed in dharma and I was feeling at least happier than this kind of a sinful materialistic life. Where is that dharmic intelligence? He was trying to look. So Puranjana started searching for the queen. And he remembered his wife, the beautiful Puranjani, and his mind was again attracted by her beautiful features. But he was looking around, he couldn't find her. And Puranjana saw the household ladies who were serving in the palace and he asked them that I am back. Are you all not happy? Where is your mistress, the queen? I'm looking everywhere, but I cannot find my wife. My whole home seems empty. Neither the house nor all his wealth is attractive to me now. And Puranjana gives a very interesting statement in the story. He says, what use is a house, even if it is full of wealth, if there is neither a loving mother or a loving wife in the house? It is a desolate place. This is also a very interesting point. So even in material life, of course, he's talking materially here, even in material life, if one doesn't have love and affection at home, and for a man, he gets that love and affection through his mother and through his wife. If neither of them are at the home, what is the use? What is the value of the home? What learned man will remain in such a house? Very interesting. So what he's actually trying to say, or what is the hidden meaning behind this, is that mother here is referring to Bhakti, Lord Hari. And wife is the intelligence which is devoted to dharma, and the dharma is teaching one devotion to Vishnu. So if these are not there, how can the living entity be happy? There are smaller, other finer points of the comparison, but I'm not going through all the points since we'll not have time. So where is my wife? Where is Puranjani, who saves me by giving me good intelligence at every step when I'm drowning in the ocean of danger? So the women who are around, they say, we do not know why, but your wife, Puranjani, is lying down on the floor there. She's not lying on the bed, she's lying on the floor, but we do not know what happened. Then the king goes there and seeing Puranjani lying on the floor, he was shocked. She's a queen, she's a Maharani there, and she's in a very disarrayed form, lying on the bare floor. He became bewildered when Puranjan saw Puranjani lying like this. So, in a similar way, the living entity, when he realizes he has performed sinful activities, he eventually comes to the end, he wants to again attain dharmic intelligence. He realizes, oh, I have committed a great offense. And he understands that he needs to regain his spiritual intelligence. So Puranjan, King Puranjan starts to pacify his wife. So with very sweet words and with very regretful words. He was actually very expert in flattery. So he speaks very flattering words to her to appease her. And she's angry, obviously, because he abandoned her and went into the forest. Because he abandoned his wife and went to hunt for other enjoyment outside. So obviously she is very upset. He tries to pacify her. No, actually, you are the only real friend of mine. I'm sorry. I left you and went. She was so angry that he went and he touched her feet. And he embraced her. He said he kept her on his lap and then tried to appease her with very sweet and loving words. So again, this represents that the soul is in his own consciousness realizing his mistake. He's saying that from today onwards, I will not use my intelligence to enjoy sinfully. I'll make sure that I remain fixed in dharma. And I will give up my false ego. And I will always respect the devotees. So in that way, he placed this dharmic intelligence again back in his heart. So in very sweet words, Puranjan pacifies his queen. He tells her, very interesting way, he says that an unfortunate servant is not punished by his master for his offenses. Which means actually when a master punishes his servant, it should be considered actually fortunate, because that means the master loves his servant. Should not be upset about it. So in the same way, a devotee thinks that the Lord has punished me to teach me something. And now that I've learnt my lesson, I will not again deviate from the path of spiritual intelligence. The devotee understands that the Lord's punishment to him is actually for his own good. It is his mercy. so that the devotee doesn't again become attached. The devotee aspires, he will always remain steady in his spiritual intelligence. So Puranjan continues and says that, actually, a master's chastisement should be accepted as a great mercy by the servant. Only a fool will become angry. So please give up your anger. Show me your beautiful face. And says, oh, hero's wife, to his wife. If anybody has offended you and caused you to be miserable like this, then I will punish them. Anyone I will punish. Actually, he is himself the cause of this misery. It's not that somebody else, but he's trying to show that he's willing to do anything to please her. But he says one thing, I will punish anybody. But there are two kinds of people he cannot punish. As long as they are not Brahmanas or they are not Vaishnavas, because Brahmanas and Vaishnavas I cannot punish. Anybody else as a Kshatriya I can punish. And he continues to tell her that actually, Puranjani, I have never seen you like this before. You are so morose, your face is without tilak, and your body is drenched with tears. All your lipstick has gone away. You're looking so dull. This is very sad. So this shows that, this is the state of the intelligence, that the intelligence was not happy that it was abandoned. So thinking of me as your subordinate, an intimate subordinate, please be kind to me. I have offended you by going to the forest, but now I am realizing my mistake and I'm feeling attracted to you again. So please embrace me back again. So he's pleading to her. So Puranjan, in this way, he successfully manages to convince his wife Puranjani, and she also finally gives up her anger, also becomes reconciles with him, and in that way, king becomes pacified, the queen becomes pacified. So that is what the chapter is about. So essentially, the chapter is about Puranjan's experience of giving up his dharmic intelligence, and how the giving up of the dharmic intelligence actually gave him so much misery that finally he had to come back and take shelter of his dharmic intelligence again. So the important lesson for all of us is that the path of dharma, even though it may seem difficult, even though it may seem inconvenient, one must be firmly convinced that the path of happiness is always in following the regulations of scripture. The regulations of scripture are not meant to be an impediment to enjoyment. They are meant to regulate us in a way so that we do not actually lead ourselves into suffering. Prabhupada explains very nicely. He says that some people think that the path of happiness is unrestricted sense enjoyment, but no. The Vedas are very clear that just because we have senses doesn't mean we can enjoy unrestrictedly. No. Unrestricted enjoyment is the life of animals. Actually, if we strictly analyze, even animals don't do that. Even animals, enjoy and consume only to the extent. There was I read somewhere a very interesting comment. I don't remember the exact details, but it said that if you give 100 bananas to a monkey will take the few that it can eat and go away. But if you give 100 bananas to a man, even if he is not hungry, he will take all the 100 and go. This human being is always so greedy, much more than what he needs. Or he tries to enjoy and consume much more than he needs. So in that way, he actually becomes even worse than the animals. So the path of unrestricted sense enjoyment is not the path of happiness. And many people who are actually, even in this world, who are poor, not having great means, they sometimes dream that, oh, if I become rich and if I can buy anything, if I can eat anything, if I can sleep anywhere, if I can do this and do that, oh, I'll be so happy. But some of those people who eventually make it, eventually realize that no, increasing sense enjoyment is not the path which leads to actual happiness and peace. The nature of senses and sense enjoyment is when you try to push them too hard, it actually results in misery rather than enjoyment. And that's why the scriptures warn us that as conditioned souls, as souls who are not yet purified, as souls who are attracted to sense enjoyment, yes, the Shastras do allow us some degree of sense enjoyment, but the Shastras strongly recommend that all our sense enjoyment must be regulated. And that is why the scriptures give so many rules and regulations. So that while we can enjoy and try to get some satisfaction based on our material propensities, one doesn't indulge in material sense enjoyment to the degree that it will actually cause damage to us spiritually also and even materially. So the whole system of Vedic life has been designed very scientifically, very intelligently. And that is why Prabhupada would call the regulative principles not as as to be seen as bondage, but he would say these are the regulative principles of freedom. What does that mean? Unrestricted sense enjoyment leads to bondage. Even though it seems like unrestricted enjoyment is freedom. I can do anything, anytime I want, and I can enjoy any way I want. It sounds like freedom, but actually it leads to bondage. But those who regulate themselves and their sense activities and make sure they follow the path of dharma by at least following the four regulative principles of no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, no illicit sex, they come to the platform of mode of goodness, the platform of human form of life, so that they can make nice spiritual progress. So human beings must regulate themselves. He who doesn't regulate himself according to dharma is like an animal. Dharmena hinaha pashubhi samanaha. So this is the beginning of human form of life. This is not spiritual advancement. This is the beginning. To become spiritually advanced, first one has to be a human being. Prabhupada would often say that sometimes devotees would say, oh, will I make spiritual advancement by following four regulative principles? Prabhupada says four regulative principles are not for spiritual advancement. They are bring you first to human form of life. Because if you're not following that, you are lower than humans. Only when you come to human form of life and start establishing yourself in Sattva Guna can come to a level of the gunas and steady intelligence that you can make progress in spiritual life. So four regulative principles is more a hygiene principle. Hygiene means it is necessary, not sufficient. Necessary, but not sufficient. So one comes to the human form of life when one follows these principles. Actually, in olden times, almost all the population, the civilized world, would follow these regulative principles. As we discussed earlier in the chapter, even great kings and kshatriyas, even if they wanted to eat meat, they would, either do the sacrifice or go to the forest and hunt a rabbit or a porcupine and eat the flesh and then come back. This would never happen. There would not be slaughterhouses where meat was sold. People would come and buy meat. No, that wasn't the system. So in that way, everything was regulated, and through that regulation, people ensured that they didn't get totally distracted from the real goal of life. So that is the focus of the discussion for this chapter. There isn't a lot of philosophical or spiritual discussion here. So the key point of this chapter is that one needs to keep one's spiritual intelligence if one wants to be progressive in life. So a dharmic intelligence is needed. Better than dharmic intelligence is spiritual intelligence. Krishna speaks in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita about Buddhi Yoga. Tells him, so far I have told you about Sankhya, but now Buddhi Yogam Tumam Shrunu. Now you hear from me about Buddhi Yoga, about the yoga of spiritual intelligence. The Buddhi by which one can achieve yoga, the understanding or intelligence by which one can actually connect with the Supreme Lord. So that is one step higher than just simply dharmic intelligence. Dharmic intelligence is guiding one towards one's proper duty based on the modes. The highest duty is to connect oneself in yoga. So that is Parabuddhi, spiritual intelligence. But one has to first come to the point of dharmic intelligence and then go to Parabuddhi. So sometimes people misquote the last few verses of Bhagavad Gita. This is Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Vrajaham Tvam Sarvapapebhyo Mokshe Sharanmascha. People are so interested in Sarva Dharman Parityajya that give up all varieties of religion. So they're eager to give up religion. But what Krishna is trying to say, not that you give up religion, Krishna is trying to say that the highest religion is to take full shelter of him. And if you take full shelter of him, you don't need to follow other religious principles, because that is the supreme principle. But people who do not understand this point properly, they're eager to give up religion and become irreligious by falsely imagining themselves as being devotees of the Lord. So for us as sadhakas, to maintain proper dharmic behavior is very important. As sadhakas, we should not think of ourselves as transcendental, that we are great devotees, we are beyond the rules of varnashram dharma. I don't need to follow the social principles. I don't need to follow moral and ethical principles. No, it's not true. Even the greatest of devotees, whether you see the lives of the Pandavas, whether you see the lives of the characters in Mahabharata, Ramayana, wherever, even the greatest of souls, they were always dharma parayan. Of course, their ultimate goal was to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but they always, as long as they were in society, they would always very humbly follow the system established by the Lord. Not with a material motivation, with a spiritual motivation. Swanushchidasya dharmasya sansiddhyar haritoshanam. The perfection of the following of religious principles is to please the Supreme Personality of God. Those who are not so advanced, they perform dharma to achieve kama and artha. But those who are more advanced, they perform dharma for haritoshanam, for pleasing the Supreme Personality of God. So we have to evolve in that direction. From adharma to sakam dharma to nishkama dharma and to bhakti, which is parodharma. From adharma to sakam dharma to nishkam dharma to parodharma. And what is that parodharma? Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje. What is the parodharma of all living entities at all times and all places? Ahaituki apratihata yatma suprasiddha. To perform uninterrupted and unmotivated devotional service to the Supreme Transcendental Lord, by performing which the heart will be completely satisfied. Because the heart will not be completely satisfied even by performing dharma. Adharma, one will be always agitated. When one starts following sakam dharma, one's agitation starts settling down and one starts being a bit peaceful, one starts to be able to reflect a little bit more about religion. When one comes to nishkama dharma, one becomes much more steady and one is able to reflect very deeply on spiritual principles and understand the futility of material existence. But complete happiness and satisfaction of the soul comes only when one takes complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje ahaituki apratihata yaya atma suprasi. So that is the journey we are on. And one cannot just jump. We are sadhakas. As sadhakas, it is our duty to follow our dharmic duties and devote ourselves to the sadhana of cultivating pure dharma. When we actually become transcendental, become pure devotees, go beyond the modes, then it will no longer be binding on us to follow the principles of varnashram dharma. But until then, Krishna says this in the Gita also, as a matter of duty, one must follow the dharmic principles with detachment. Not in the same way that Prachina Bhari was doing, because he was not following with detachment, he was following with attachment. The risk of following dharma with attachment, sakam, karma, is that one will just remain attached in that lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. One will not evolve higher. So one has to gradually, through the performance of tapa, dana, yajna, gradually purify himself and come to a higher plan. So I want to stop here. Completed chapter 26. I have not analyzed each and every point in great detail, but I think we have done a fair job in terms of giving covering most of the points. So any questions or comments?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I have a question from different chapter. Pandavas, when they left the earth, they went back to spiritual world with their own bodies. So a bit confused, Prabhuji.
No, they did not go back to the. No, it is not mentioned like that. Who has said that
Maybe
they went in bodies? Huh?
Maybe I took a different interpretation.
No. So the only thing that is mentioned is all the Pandavas, including Draupadi and the 4 Pandavas, when they were doing the Swargarohan, right? They walked into the Himalayas, no? They went to Badrik Ashram. They crossed the Saraswati River over the Bhim Pool. We visited that Bhim Pool. Jima, he put a stone over the Saraswati. That stone is still there. Then they crossed over that. Draupadi asked him to make that bridge. They crossed over and they went into the Himalayas. That's the last village of the Indian country. It's a place known as Mana today's time. So we went there. Once you go there, after that is all deep into the Himalayas. All snowy Himalayas will start beyond that. So they just walked. Their whole purpose was to walk into the Himalayas until they die. So Draupadi fell first, very close after the bridge, maybe a few 100 meters from that bridge. Draupadi, small temple is there where Draupadi left her body. Then further ahead, Nakul, Sahadev, Arjun, Bhima, It was only Yudhishthir who did not physically die because he was tested by Yamaraj. And because of his extraordinary merit, he passed that test. He was taking in that body to heaven. Heaven means not Goloka. He was taken to the heavenly planet.
Yeah, it is what I got confused from. Same thing like what you said now.
Yeah. So of course that means he didn't die in a material way. Somehow his body was transformed. Of course, there must be a transformation because you cannot enter the realm, in that body. What it means is he did not die the conventional sense that he died and then his subtle body went. Somehow his body was made heaven ready, whatever that means. I don't know what technology that is, what exactly happens in that process. But somehow it is said that, a plane came and he was taken. So the Mahabharata describes that they went to the heaven for some time. But the Acharya has explained there are a few explanations of that. Anyway, I don't want to go into too much detail, but eventually they went to the spiritual world. So that aspect of they're going to heaven is explained as an intermediate transit point to also give some lessons. But they eventually went to the spiritual world because they're originally from the spiritual world, the Pandavas.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Oh, got it, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Any other questions? I'm looking at the comments in case you're wondering what I'm doing. Okay, Ankan, so yeah, I'll share the recording. Thank you, Sachi Prema Mataji. Ankan has also mentioned the comment detachment, staying in samsara, parents, kids sometimes seems very difficult. Alone, it is easy. Actually, it is not like that. Anyway, so the way for us is either we are advanced enough to not be involved in a materialistic life and devote ourselves directly to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if we are not at that point, Krishna says, no, do not do mithyachar. Mithyachar means do not do pretense. Pretense means you think you are at a particular platform, but you are not there. You are trying to act like somebody whom you are not. But in your mind, you are always thinking of material things. So, for example, somebody is in a brahmachari ashram, is always thinking of girls. He's thinking, oh, I wish I could go to the movies. Oh, I wish I had a job and I had a lot of money. I could enjoy this, enjoy that. What is the point? What is important is that the mind is absorbed. So, Grihastha life is a way by which dharmic Grihastha life is the means to detachment. One must understand that. A dharmic Grihastha life, which is centered on Krishna, leads to detachment. One has to go through it properly. By performing, if one performs one's responsibilities, follows one dharma with respect to wife, children, parents, society, job, country, all one's duties and obligations one properly tries to execute eventually, and keeping Krishna in the center does his sadhana, one will, through that process, when dharma is properly performed, along with worship of the Supreme Lord, one actually develops detachment properly. And lasting and deeper detachment is produced. So one should not think, unless one is actually advanced, one should not try to artificially try to think that if I can dump this inconvenience, I can make myself happy. People who have tried that, actually it backfires. It became exactly like Puranjan, right? What did Puranjan do? He tried to do the same thing. He dumped his wife, went to the forest to enjoy. Eventually became frustrated, he came back to his wife. Because just performing, one cannot transcend one's attachment like that. It is not so easy. So through performance of strong sadhana and also through the performance of, or through the living of a dharmic life, one comes to the firm realization, a deep realization of the futility of material existence, and one becomes exhausted with material enjoyment. Exhausted means he doesn't look for material enjoyment anymore. And then one can very strongly take. That is why in ancient times, our culture, why our system is designed like this. Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyas. It is very scientifically designed. First 25 years, one is trained in how to live life in a dharmic way and also in material skills and duties. 25 years, one gets married, then one enters Grihastha ashram. Because one is properly trained, one can then live a dharmic life where one regulates one's sense enjoyment even though he enters into a Grihastha ashram. So if one follows the 25 years, 25 to 50 in a dharmic way, performing one's dharmic duties and continuing to worship the Lord properly, then by the time he reaches 50, why do you think all these kings were eager to run away and leave home with full detachment? You see, so many Bhagavatam stories we discussed, no? The kings who are at the top of their career, they are eager. Yaar, tum le lo, mujhe jana hai, I want to go to the forest. I am done with this. How does that sense come? It comes to the proper performance of dharma along with spiritual sadhana. Those who lead sinful lives, they can lead sinful lives up to 50 also, they will not get frustrated. Sin will not, one will not, Vairagya will not come. Vairagya comes through proper following of dharma. So that is the path. Okay, any other questions, comments? Anyone? I hope you are all able to follow. I hope it was not too technical. Okay, so I'll see you all. Yeah, this Wednesday should be possible. The following Wednesday, again, I'll not be able to have a class because I have something scheduled. I'm so sorry. I'll let you know very last minute because somehow I didn't place that event on my calendar. So we'll have class this Wednesday. The following one, I will see. If not on Wednesday, maybe we'll try to adjust on another day. I'll let you know. I'm just letting you know in advance. So I'll see you on this Wednesday. Krishna willing. Okay, thank you very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hari.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, everyone. Hari Bol.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Archana ji. Hare Krishna. Sapna ji. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Suraj, Shalini, Rita ji. Nice to see all of you. Sini ji, Hare Krishna. Nice virtual backdrop of Krishna you have there. Thank you. I'll see you on Wednesday.